Okay, Chapter 6, Video 4, Part 4 that is. We're talking about defamation, which can be libel or slander, and we're now talking about defenses. Truth is an absolute defense, so if what the person said is true and you can prove it, no damages, no cause of action, no win for the plaintiff. If it's privileged or immune speech, there are certain types of speech that are privileged. For example, what a legislator says on the floor of the legislature is privileged. So that cannot be the basis for a cause of action for slander. So that's one type of privilege. Lawyers have a privilege when they're in court. So if you're arguing a case in court and you say something that the other person believes, that some person believes is false, you can't sue the lawyer. Okay, the rationale behind that is that we want lawyers to be aggressive in representing their clients and not fear being sued if something they say is false. Certain privileges can be either absolute or qualified. An absolute privilege, such as a judicial or government proceeding, and attorneys, as I said. Qualified privileges include an employer statement in writing about evaluating an employee if it's made in good faith and it's limited in its publication to those who have a legitimate interest. So these qualifiers are what make it a qualified privilege. It has to be made in good faith and only to the limited people who have an interest in knowing about it. Okay, so that protects businesses and employers when other people are asking for a reference or how that person worked in their job when they were working for that employer. Okay, we talked about public figures. Okay, another intentional tort is the invasion of privacy. It is a common law tort as well as now a statutory tort in many jurisdictions, and it is improperly infringing on another's privacy, and there are 4 different types. Intrusion is where you intrude on a person's private affairs or seclusion. So when one of the paparazzi fly a helicopter 10 feet over somebody's backyard pool who's a celebrity, that could be intrusion. False light is publication of information that places a person in a false light. Public disclosure of private facts. And last, appropriation, which is the use of another's name, likeness, or other identifying characteristics for commercial purposes without the owner's consent. So if you were selling a product and you took a picture of a popular celebrity and you pasted it on your product to make people think that they were supporting your product, that would be appropriation and give rise to a potential lawsuit. Revenge porn is a new kind of activity. It's the publication of private pictures by a person from a former relationship with the intent to humiliate the person. Usually these are pictures of a explicitly sexual act or nature. Many states have passed statutes that make this actionable. Other states engulf this in traditional remedies such as invasion of privacy. Okay. Another intentional tort is fraudulent misrepresentation or fraud. This is intentional deceit, usually done for personal gain. The elements are a misrepresentation of a material fact with the intent to induce the other to rely on the misrepresentation. There has to be, the person has to justifiably relied on it. There has to be damages that were suffered as a result of that, and a causal connection between the two. Now, we differentiate that from puffery, which is seller's talk. So let's put this in the context of a automobile used car dealer. If a used car dealer shows you a car on the lot and says, this is the best car I've had on my lot in 20 years, that's probably puffery. You know that the guy's saying that just to sell the car. Anyway, the nature of it is puffery. On the other hand, if he tells you that it is a 1965 Mustang, when in fact it's a 1967 Mustang, that would be, and meets these characteristics, that would be fraud. The reason I use that example is because ordinarily a 67 car would be worth more than a 65. But because the 65 was the first Mustang, it becomes a collector's item and is probably worth a lot more than a 67. So if you bought it thinking it was a 65 because of this fraud, then you'd have a cause of action against that used car dealer. Okay. Abusive and frivolous litigation. Most states have these either statutorily or through case law. Malicious prosecution is where the plaintiff brings a lawsuit that was unfounded, frivolous, with malice, in other words, with intent of harming the other person, and it results in injury. The injury can simply be the cost of defending the lawsuit. Abusive process is when you serve somebody with a lawsuit for a purpose for which the process was not designed. In other words, just to harass the person. Okay. Wrongful interference with a contractual relationship would be something you might face in a business context. It occurs when the defendant knows that there's been a contract entered into between A and B and intentionally induces A or B to breach the contract so that the defendant benefits. Okay? So, let's say that the University of North Georgia hires REM to perform a concert for the student body and is paying them $20,000 for this concert. Okay, the University of Georgia wants to hire REM for the same night, knows about the contract with the University of North Georgia, but goes to REM and says, we'll pay you $100,000 if you perform a concert that night for us instead of UNG. That would be a cause of action which would authorize UNG to sue University of Georgia for wrongful interference with a contractual relationship. Okay, so these are some of the elements that can be looked at with regard to that. Now, if it's a bona fide competition, then that's going to be an exception. Okay. Alright, so here is a chart with the intentional torts that we've talked about. Again, the magic word for Chapter 6 is duty. We're going to pick up with torts with regard to property, both real and personal, in the next video.